Welcome to the Michael Rivero What Really Happened radio program.
And welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, getting into the week here. We have got a lot to talk about today, and as usual, we're going to do news until we run out of news. Then we're going to open up the phone lines for your comments, questions, opinions, and observations. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, so let's get right on into it. On this day in 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. It was a huge eruption, one of the largest in recorded U.S. history, and just darkened the sky over several states there. And I remember when Claire and I lived in Washington State, we went down there to see the remains of it, and was definitely impressive there. Okay, now yesterday, talk about coincidences. Yesterday, I was talking about this new HBO documentary, The Crime of the Century, about the opioid crisis and how Big Pharma made a ton of money off of it. And just as I got off the show last night, I turned on the TV and there was part 2 of the documentary. It's in 2 parts. It's a 4-hour documentary. And so I did watch it, and I went to the HBO website and hunted down the times for episode 1. They didn't have episode 2 listed yet, but I'll keep an eye out for that. This is something you really do need to watch. And if you have any lingering doubt that the purpose of the medical industrial complex is to make money off of you, this documentary is going to erase that. This is a must-see when it becomes available on DVD. Definitely want to buy this one for your library. And once again, it's called The Crime of the Century, HBO documentaries. It's on, episode 1 is on several times this week. I've already got my DVR queued up to record that. Okay, let's get into the election fraud because there's a lot going on there. And there's a story that came on out from Cuz Blue saying what we've ultimately been saying all along, that if the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors believed in the results of their election, they would welcome the audit. But that's not what's happening. They're doing everything possible to block the auditors, to hide the equipment, to hide the routers, to hide access to the Dominion voting machines. They're basically telegraphing that something crooked happened on that election. Another article, this one from uns.com, saying exactly the same thing. If there is no election fraud, why are Democrats desperate to block Maricopa County? Not to mention everywhere else where audits are taking place here. And Democrats are refusing to comply with court orders. They're saying that the audit is racist. There's no basis for that, but they really don't have any other argument they can use to explain why they're working so hard to try and block an attempt to verify what happened last November. Now, remember, the burden of proof is on the government here. And I get a lot of emails from people saying, well, you've got to prove there was fraud. No, I don't. We don't. We have a government that is claiming authority over us on the basis of that election, and that means the burden of proof is on them to prove the election was fair and honest and that they are the legitimate government, and so far they have failed to do that. And again, politics is perception, and this extraordinary effort to block all attempts to verify the election from last November is telegraphing that there is something to hide. Another article along the same lines, this is from Investment Watch blog, talking about Arizona GOP chairwoman Kelly Wahr, basically saying, if this election was so clean, why did the Democrats need a well-funded propaganda machine to try and defend it? Now, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors held a meeting yesterday to try and strategize their conformity, in other words, get their lies to line up ahead of a grilling before the Senate that is taking place right now as we speak about missing files, missing passwords, and why Dominion voting systems seems to have been running the election, which was, after all, the job of the county supervisors. Over in Windham, New Hampshire, their audit is showing ample evidence that the voting machines favored the Democrats. They're simply not reliable. They cannot be trusted. Dr. David Strang, MD, is the Belknap County Republican Committee State Committee member, and on Sunday, he examined the latest results from the Windham, New Hampshire elections audit, and he said the results are just stunning. And there, pardon me, were at least 2 other towns that had these same voting machines that showed Democrat favoritism. And according to Dr. Strange, these voting machines were always the machines that were fed the most ballots in these communities. This is a repetitive peculiarity that is being seen. So Dr. Strang believes the state has a huge problem on its hands. The election cannot be verified. And the totals from the Windham machines cannot be replicated. Only the hand counts are reliable. And the machines, based on the hand counts, were shorting Republicans at a greater rate than Democrat candidates. And this was a consistent pattern all the way through. Now, remember, if it was an honest accident or software error, then you would expect statistically errors to fall on both sides of the break-even point. There should be as many errors harming Republicans as there are benefiting Republicans. That did not happen. Everything that happened always benefited the Democrats. So the Windham audit team is going to the New Hampshire Senate race to look at that again because they're thinking that GOP candidates all across the state were shorted votes, and the entire election for the state may have been crooked. Story out of Investment Watch blog talking about this mysterious situation where the closed circuit TV cameras were mysteriously disabled in the audit room for 90 minutes. Just a complete blackout so that somebody could do something nefarious. And there are multiple cameras, and we could maybe understand a camera going down, but they all went down for an hour and a half. Now, attorney Matt DiPerno held a press conference in Antrim County and said that anyone with access to the voting machines could go into those machines after the election, change the results, and backdate the cheating. DiPerno and his team say the tabulator machines could be reopened after the election. The machines could then run more ballots through the tabulator, print off a new tabulator tape with new totals, and then backdate that tape to November 3rd. In other words, the machines were wide open for fraud, and unfortunately, this came in just before we went to airtime. The 13th Circuit Court Judge Kevin Eisenheimer has basically dismissed the Antrim County election case. The judge ruled that William Bailey, a resident of Antrim County, had received the relief he sought after he filed the lawsuit last year following the election. Bailey was seeking an independent audit, but the judge decided that the February risk limiting audit conducted by the county clerks themselves were sufficient under state law. Now, the lawyer, Matthew DiPerno again, is going to appeal that decision and ask for reconsideration. He's also going to file other lawsuits as well. But it basically shows us the entire system has become corrupted, where, the judges up to and including the Supreme Court are absolutely refusing to look at this. And this is the biggest political scandal in U.S. history. Now, down in Fayette County, they're having a primary election today, and it's already being reported by KDKA television that their voting machines are not accepting Republican ballots. All the ballots are marked with a barcode, and ballots being fed into the machines that are from Republicans are being rejected. I mean, it's that open and that blatant. Story coming on out of Knock Report. talking about Jovan Pulitzer, who became famous for testifying before state legislatures about voter fraud. Following that, of course, he was attacked by corporate media and the Democrats. He was denounced as racist and, a Trump supporter. They tried to discredit him, and that really did not work. And in an interview with David K. Clements on the Professor's Record, Pulitzer revealed that he had been offered a $10 million bribe to drop his investigation of election fraud. So they really are getting desperate out there. Speaking of election fraud, as you're probably aware, Amazon employees recently had an election regarding unionization. The union lost, but now, according to this story coming out of Al Jazeera, no less, it turns out that the security department at the Amazon.com warehouse in Alabama had the keys to the mailbox the company encouraged employees to use to mail their ballots into the union election earlier this year. So Amazon was able to get into that mailbox and pick out the ballots they wanted to go forward and get rid of the ballots that they did not. So election fraud is happening all over the place, including Amazon. It is really, really scary. And I get all these people calling into the show and talking about, well, we're going to retake the House and the Senate in 2022. No, you're not. Until somebody takes a sledgehammer to all those computer machines and goes back to hand counting all ballots in front of witnesses, the Democrats are never going to lose another election. We are going to be a one political party nation like the former Soviet Union, and that did not work out very well for those people, and I really do not want to see it here. Okay. Now, last week, Revolver News pointed out the key hatchet man promoted to the Pentagon to basically purge the military, of all Donald Trump sympathizers and install these radical race theory. And his name is Bishop Garrison. He's the head of the Pentagon's new Countering Extremism Initiative. And by the way, other armies around the world, like Russia and China, are laughing at this, that we're eviscerating our own ground military in the name of political correctness. But Bishop Garrison is out there basically saying that free speech is a digital black plague. In other words, he is at war with that First Amendment. Now, I'm an old-fashioned constitutionalist, and I hold that any government that is not 100% in compliance with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is not a legitimate government of this land. And we have seen the Fourth Amendment be eviscerated. They're certainly on the warpath against the Second Amendment. And now they're on the warpath against the First Amendment, hiding behind corporate lackeys like Facebook and Google and Twitter. And they're turning this country into something really, really ugly. Over in North Carolina, we're going to have more riots for this one. The district attorney for Pasquotank County is not going to bring criminal charges against sheriff's deputies who shot and killed Andrew Brown Jr. in Elizabeth City, saying that the shooting was in fact justified and the deputies reasonably believed it was necessary to use deadly force to protect themselves. Now, I don't know the circumstances of the case, but it's we know from past history there's going to be more riots. Black Lives Matter and Antifa are going to be out there burning up the cities because they're not getting their pound of flesh. Story coming out of Fox News, amazingly enough, there is a new group called the Unsilenced Majority. It was founded by Mike Davis. He's a former staffer for the Senate Judiciary Committee under Senator Chuck Grassley, and they're planning to fight against cancel culture by giving the woke left a dose of their own medicine. And He's talking about organizing investors and corporations to start pushing back against woke culture, because he says these corporations that are going woke are not doing so out of a sense of commitment or belief or ideology. They are being pressured by shareholders who are being pressured by the liberal media, and it is now time to provide a counterbalance, and he's absolutely right about that. It is time for patriotic Americans to start making a lot of noise, to call the companies that you own stock in and say, go back to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, or I'm going to sell my stock. Now, the corporations made themselves a battleground in wokeness, and now they're going to have to live with that. Getting on to COVID-19, Andrew Cuomo has now announced that New Yorkers can get rid of their face masks after all, just 4 days after he said everyone had to keep them on despite the new guidance from the CDC. So he must have seen the poll numbers and heard the anger out there. Meanwhile, Target is going to follow Walmart, Costco, and Trader Joe in ditching face masks for fully vaccinated customers, except where local rules order their use. Now, I don't know if this means that when you go into Target or Walmart, they're going to ask to see your vaccine card or not. Or if they're going to rely on the honor system. But I'll be very honest, the last time Claire and I were in Walmart, we saw a lot of people not bothering with those masks anymore. And I still wear mine because it makes a point. My mask is printed saying, if pants can't stop a fart, do you really think this mask will stop a virus? And people will read that and they'll laugh, and it makes them think, and I think that's a good use for the mask to have. Story coming on out of the Gateway Pundit. The CDC director is finally admitting what we already knew. COVID cases were overcounted in the hospitals. Remember, there was a financial incentive that when hospitals reported a COVID-19 death, they received some money. But the CDC is now saying that only 6% of the deaths claimed to have been caused by COVID were due entirely to the coronavirus. All the others were ancillary causes, and they just put COVID-19 on the death certificate for the financial inducement. So the CDC's new numbers are saying that only 9,210 Americans died from the COVID-19 alone. The rest died from other serious illnesses they had in addition to COVID. Now, keeping an eye on the number of vaccine injuries and deaths, I think we're already back in 1976, where the vaccines are causing more harm than the actual virus is itself. And that was a big stink in 1976, and it's turning out to be a big stink here in 2021. And all of those social media outlets like YouTube that have been banning people for being the voice of caution, all of those deaths and injuries from the vaccines are on their hands. The blood is on their hands. And I'm sure that the top executives there are well invested in big pharma. And the low-level workers are going to say, well, I'm just following my orders. But again, the Nazis said that at Nuremberg, and they still wound up hanging those people. So, by the way, as an experiment, I'm still banned by YouTube, by the way. And I'm still looking for a new streaming service so I don't have to go back there. As an experiment earlier today, I typed in hot oil nude massage into the YouTube page, and you would not believe the flood of, pornographic videos that were served up in response to that search. And yet my show, which says, let's be careful about these vaccines, gets banned by YouTube. I think it's a little hypocritical of them to be allowing one and not the other. And I'm going to be doing some other searches on YouTube to look for some really gross and disgusting things, and and try and publicly shame YouTube for taking the position that it has. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these. Back to our show here. We're talking about COVID-19, and Something else the corporate media is not reporting on is how more and more people are refusing to get those vaccinations. And so what is the United States going to do with all these extra vaccines they bought and paid for with your money? Well, they're starting to ship them overseas to other countries that are still feeling the panic from COVID-19. And looking at a story coming out of Damagood.com, the Biden administration has announced that Washington will ship 20 million more vaccines overseas, saying that it's up to the United States to fight COVID around the world because no ocean is wide enough to keep us safe. And it sounds really good, but that's how they're going to get rid of all those extra unused vaccines. Now, OSHA has come out with a major bombshell. As you are already aware, there are laws that prevent you from suing the vaccine manufacturers from adverse reactions caused by their product. When they're indemnified like that, of course, they can make mistakes, they can rush, and people can die and be permanently injured, and nothing happens to them. But OSHA has now said that employers who mandate COVID vaccines as a condition of continued employment can be held liable for the adverse reaction. So if you're working for a company that says you must get the shot, and you get an adverse reaction, you better get on the phone to your lawyer because OSHA is saying your boss can, in fact, be sued for the damages that you are suffering. All righty, let's get into the international news now, and I'm sorry to report that things are still pretty much the same over in Israel and Palestine, and they're still shooting at each other. Now, Israel is claiming there'll be a ceasefire in a few days. I think they're counting on the Palestinians running out of rockets, although, to be very honest, they have continued a lot longer than most people thought they were going to be able to keep it up. So it's really getting ugly there. Israel is now targeting Gaza hospitals. And Israel obliterated a number of buildings and roads, impeding emergency service access to locations affected by the attacks. According to Palestine's Ministry of Information, over 1,000 residential units have been damaged due to Israeli airstrikes, as well as 36 schools and primary health care clinics. The Ministry of Information estimates that $18 million worth of damage has been done to streets and infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. And Israel bombed one of the power distribution stations, basically plunging Gaza into the dark. And unfortunately, if there are any people in their homes with electrically powered medical assistance devices, well, they're being basically left to just die slowly. More than 200 Palestinians in the Strip have been killed since last Monday, including 60 children and 34 women. 3 of the women were pregnant when they were killed, according to the United Nations Human Rights Office. Remember that T-shirt the IDF used to wear all the time? It said 1 shot, 2 kills, and it showed a very pregnant Palestinian woman in the set of crosshairs from a rifle scope. There's a little bit of sick humor there. One story coming on out of Gaza, there was one house that was hit. 10 family members were killed, but 1 baby survived. And they dug the baby out of the rubble, and it's now with relatives, but at least it's that 1 survivor there. Meanwhile, the Israeli military invaded the Al-Makassad hospital in East Jerusalem in direct violation of international law and the 4th Geneva Convention, which forbids military forces from invading hospitals and medical centers. So the Israeli troops attacked the Palestinian civilians of the town of Al-Tur. Local youth threw rocks at them. Oh, how dare they do that. And patients at the hospital were impacted by sound bombs. And so, yeah, it was an ugly situation. You know, it's interesting because you're seeing Israel supporters all over saying that, you know, Palestine does not have a right to fight back against Israel. That's like saying a woman doesn't have a right to fight back against her rapist, in my opinion. And I think it needs to be put in those terms. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes hit the Red Crescent building. That's the Palestinian equivalent of the Red Cross. Again, a medical facility. 2 people were killed. And again, this is a blatant violation of international law and the Geneva Convention to target these medical facilities. Palestinians in Israel, occupied East Jerusalem, and the West Bank are now calling for a general strike from all the way from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. And they want to do it to show unity amid the ongoing Israeli bombardment on the Gaza Strip. Now, interestingly enough, oh my goodness, I got to take another break here. We'll be right back. To our show here, we're talking about the ongoing conflict in Israel and Palestine. Now, Israel maintains an offshore gas rig near Haifa, which has now been caught up in a huge ongoing fire. The Israeli media is saying that the explosion was caused by a technical malfunction, but we cannot rule out the possibility that the Palestinians were able to get to that facility and cause some damage. Don't forget, the other day, Israel claimed to have located and sunk a Palestinian submersible weapon. So there may be something out there. We really don't know. Meanwhile, Palestinian resistance fighters targeted an Israeli warship off the Gaza coast as the fighting enters yet another week. And the Ezzedine Al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas, announced in a statement that an Israeli battleship had been hit off the coast of the Gaza Strip with a barrage of missiles. So they're proving to be a little bit more difficult to deal with than Israel expected, I think. Meanwhile, claiming that Lebanon had fired rockets at them, the Israeli military is now shelling Lebanon. That's going to ratchet up tensions between Lebanon and Israel. And I'm looking at this article coming out of Sputnik News saying that it may be time for Hezbollah to step on in to save Lebanon from a potential collapse, because of this additional pressure coming in from Israel. Over in Ramallah, Palestinian armed groups are holding protests in the city in support of their Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, which is a coalition of Palestinian armed groups in the West Bank, announced the decision on Monday. So everybody, they're continuing to gear up. The situation is getting worse. It's not getting better. And adding to the fire and fury and fatalities, the Biden regime has signed off on the sale of $735 million in missiles to Israel, the same exact type used to strike the Gaza Tower that was housing international media outlets. And you would think this is making things worse. But according to U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken, he says the Biden administration is working to end the violence in Israel and Palestine, and that's why they sold Israel $735 million worth of bombs, which you're ultimately going to pay for, as well as interfering in all efforts by the United Nations Security Council to try and rein Israel in. Over in Iran, the foreign minister Mohammad Javad Zarif came on out saying that the U.S., with this weapon sale, is helping Israel kill more children with more precision. So this is Israel is turning into a global pariah, and they are sadly taking the United States with them. We reported on this yesterday. It is now 3 times the U.S. has blocked the United Nations Security Council attempts to urge a ceasefire in Gaza. So much for Blinken's comment about working behind the scenes for peace. So these Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have resumed. And meanwhile, Netanyahu is thanking the Biden administration for blocking efforts by the United Nations Security Council to call for a ceasefire. Okay. All right. Now, here's an interesting little story. It's coming out of Sputnik News, and it's blowing the whistle on what appears to be a secret Department of Defense, secret army, for lack of a better word here, and they're equating this scandal to the Pentagon Papers, which came on out and revealed that the U.S. knew they could not win in Vietnam, but kept the war going for years afterwards because nobody wanted to be the person who stood up and said, we've lost this one. So this report that has come on out says that the Department of Defense is operating a 60,000 strong troop secret army that operates inside the United States of America when necessary. It engages in covert operations abroad, and if the existence of this force is confirmed, it would violate numerous United States laws as well as the Geneva Conventions on the Rules of Armed Conflict. Although at this point it's pretty obvious that we have a government, unelected I might add, that sees itself as above the rules and above international law and above the Geneva Conventions. So the Department of Defense is operating this 60,000 troop secret army with zero congressional oversight. And they have an annual budget of almost $1 billion. And this actually came out from Newsweek. And Newsweek is basing this story on dozens of Freedom of Information Act requests, the analysis of 1,600 resumes and job postings, interviews with people involved with this, and apparently they're also spending a lot of time online trying to deal with increasingly complex technologies. In other words, they're trying to hack the net. Who knows? Maybe this was the group that took down the Colonial Pipeline. Another article on the same tactic. This is from the Daily Mail in Great Britain. And he says that the 60,000 strong undercover army, the agents are trained to create secret identities for themselves, don disguises, and use fake identities to pursue high-value targets. So it is this huge, huge clandestine secret army. Meanwhile, Russia has established a military base in the far north, and Moscow is saying this is our land. They're saying it's the Nagurskoye Air Base in the Franz Joseph Land Archipelago. Was originally built during the Cold War as a weather station. It has now been enlarged with missiles, a radar system, and a runway capable of handling nuclear bombers. And Russia is now out there saying that this is our land, our territory, and don't you dare try and intrude up here. So Russia is definitely staking their claim to the Arctic and the mineral riches underneath the ice on the bottom of the ocean floor. Another story, this one coming on out of Russia today. Russia has developed a new radar. It's called the Yenisei radar, and it's equipped with remote control stations. In other words, there are multiple antennas that are sited in different places, and it is allows it to evade U.S. jamming. Now, with the current, or shall we say the now obsolete, single-site radars, the U.S. Air Force is very effective at jamming these radars, but it won't be able to affect the Yenisei because it traces and assigns targets with higher precision when countering powerful jamming. It is safe to assume that by accepting Yenisei into service, the Russian aerospace forces have removed the Americans' tactical advantage of jamming. Okay. Apparently, this radar can also track and assign ballistic missiles. That's a scary thought. Right. Now, we talked about the former commander of the Space Force, Matthew Lohmeyer. He was demoted last week and removed from command for speaking out against critical race theory infiltrating the U.S. military. And he was interviewed by Sean Hannity yesterday and said that they're teaching our military that whites are inherently evil. And you have to sort of figure out, why are they doing that? Are they going to really get an army ready to march against the white population of the United States of America? Posse comitatus be gosh darned. Okay, getting on into the economic news, and there's a lot out there. There is still an ongoing gas shortage left over from the disruption of the Colonial Pipeline. And right now, 90% of the gas pumps in Washington, D.C. have run dry. A total of about 12,466 stations are now closed for lack of product. Gas prices have climbed to a 7-year high. And we may not be out of the woods yet, because this story came in just before we went to airtime. Colonial Pipeline is claiming they're now experiencing network issues that leave customers unable to access their fuel shipments coming through the pipeline. And it's a system that allows customers to reserve space on the line, make changes to their batches, or receive updates on fuel traveling through the system. As of this morning, it was inaccessible. And so it may be that the hack is continuing, that somebody wants to disrupt the oil economy of the United States. There's a story floating around that the ransomware group that launched this to begin with has now received $90 million in cryptocurrency. And again, with this network disruption, you have to wonder, were they really dumb enough to come back and hit the target a second time? Or is this, in fact, a training exercise by some covert branch of the United States training to do the same thing to other countries? Or worse, is it some foreign nation practicing on how they'll shut this country down? In either case, it is underscoring the fact that our cybernetic infrastructure is wide open and unprotected. We have seen cybercrime just running rampant all over our businesses and our personal lives, and a government that just seems completely uninterested in it. And to me, that's another sign of the very poor management that this country is under right now. His fraudulency, Joe Biden and the Treasury Department announced yesterday that they're going to start sending monthly checks of up to $300 to 39 million families with children under the age of 16, basically due to an expanded tax credit for families with children. And I know they need the help, and I'm glad they're getting the help. But how is Biden really planning on paying for all this? Or is he just doing an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and simply saying, well, we'll pay for it. How will we pay for it? Well, we'll just pay for it. When Alexandria came out with the Green New Deal and everybody looked at how much it was going to cost, and they said, how are you going to pay for this? And she said, well, just pay for it. Like, it's not her problem to solve that. And on top of everything else we're dealing with, it looks like we may be hit with a modern-day Dust Bowl out in the West. And they're calling it the mega drought. And a big part of it is because the infrastructure for water distribution and irrigation in the western part of this country has not been properly maintained. And as of the last time I looked into it, it was only capable of delivering 1/3 of the amount of water it was originally designed to deliver. And there are breaks in the aqueducts, and perfectly good water is leaking into places it's not needed. Just all kinds of damage. And it has sparked a water crisis at the Oregon-California border. And there's going to be a lot of hostility up there. They can't send water to dying salmon downstream. They can't provide water to a half dozen wildlife refuges. And as a matter of fact, California and Oregon have cut off the Klamath Valley irrigation system to farmers and fisheries. What's that mean? Means there are going to be food shortages, people. Better start stocking up now. Another story on the same topic. This is from Zero Hedge. They're calling it the mega drought nightmare. No water for crops, horrific wildfires, colossal dust storms, and draconian water restrictions. And CBS News is saying that this could evolve into a permanent drought condition. Well, if you look at the history of the United States of America, the West was originally a desert and always was in drought. And that was corrected with this massive water distribution system that was basically set up in the wake of the last Dust Bowl, but it has been allowed to decay and just fall into ruin in a lot of places because our government wanted to spend the money on new missiles and new submarines and new destroyers and F-22s that asphyxiate their pilots and F-35s that still don't fly right, not to mention all the money that's being poured all over Israel. And ordinary Americans are being left to fend for themselves, and without water, they're going to be hurting. Okay, there is a new grassroots agenda being reported over in, let's see, narela.org, and they're talking about the National Rifle Association is hosting up these walk-ins, if you will, to try and oppose federal gun control. And they're going to be spending at least $2 million in this fight against federal gun control. And I certainly hope they win, because especially if the U.S. government is creating an army that sees white people as bad, then white people need to get armed up, and they need to get armed up and trained now. Okay. Getting into some science news here. There is a geomagnetic storm that is hitting the Earth today, and they're saying the storm watch is in effect between today and tomorrow. There were two Earth-facing sunspots that basically put out these coronal ejections and sent these high-energy particles this way. So if you're living in the northern latitudes and you have clear skies tonight, you might see some pretty spectacular aurora displays. That'll be kind of fun. NASA is actually starting to take seriously a proposal to send a probe out to Saturn's moon Titan to try and capture potential extraterrestrial life that could exist in those methane lakes, and then try and use some of that methane as fuel to power the journey back to Earth. Of course, that means they're going to have to take some kind of an oxidizer with them for the trip. But NASA has basically thrown a $125,000 grant for further research. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show. And let's see, we've got the mega drought, we've got the pipelines aren't working, infrastructure is collapsing. You know, what's out there that could make things even worse than they are? Well, there are these cicadas. And the cicadas are an insect, and they have a 17-year breeding life cycle, and the 17 years are up, and they're starting to hatch out in Tennessee, and they're going to hatch out in the millions. And unfortunately, right here in Indiana is considered kind of the epicenter of cicada mania. And they're predicting we're going to start seeing them by this Friday. It's a little late in the year for them to be coming on out because the month of May was a little cooler than normal. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. It's called Brood X, and there's, you know, when the entire brood emerges, backyards are going to look like they're underwater. With just waves all over, and it's going to make a huge, huge racket, and so that's going to make life kind of interesting. And they're going to be above ground for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then they burrow back underground for another 17 years. That's going to be kind of interesting there. All righty, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines, 512-248-8252. This is kind of a fable for our times here. Story coming on out of Zero Hedge. There was this gentleman who applied to Apple for a job. He was a former manager at Facebook. He's an author and a journalist, and he basically moved to take a job with Apple, only to have the people at Apple circulate a petition regarding a book that he wrote 5 years ago. Now, the gentleman is Antonio Garcia Martinez. The book is called Chaos Monkeys, and he described it as total Hunter S. Thompson gonzo mode. And Apple management knew about the book, but enough of the Apple employees got upset and woke. They put pressure, and this guy has been let go. And he completely upended his life. You know, he sold his old place, he moved out to work at Apple, and now his job is gone. Over at PBS, they're indignant. They're absolutely indignant that almost half of Americans do not believe Biden, that white supremacy is the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland today. We've seen all this anti-white stuff. And when you consider that almost half of Americans see themselves as white, they probably sort of comprehend that they're not terrorist threats. I mean, I'm not a terrorist. I'm obnoxious, irritating, and overbearing, but I am not a terrorist. All right, we're going to start taking phone calls. David in San Francisco, I'm probably going to have to take you through the break. What's on your mind?
Oh, howdy, Michael. Yeah, I heard you talking about the, it is close to the top of the hour. I heard you talking about the Arizona recount.
Yeah.
Have you actually ever read the Georgia election bill?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact, and it's tightening up areas where cheating takes place.
Well, what I was going to raise with it, and it comes up in the Arizona one, that, you know, America's voting used to be considered a private affair, right? That you had privacy in an election. And in the Arizona so-called recount, they're demanding data on the people who voted. And
yeah, but that's not saying the same thing as getting the data on how they voted. And David, I'm going to put you on hold. We got to take a break for station identification. Don't go away. I'm going to come right back to you. And welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252. We're talking with David in San Francisco, and we're talking about how elections are being organized and trying to be made fraud-proof, because election fraud has become the crisis of our current political system. And we need to understand that having data on who is voting, like their ID, is not the same thing as determining how they vote.
Hey, Michael, I just had to field another call there. If you grab a copy of the Georgia election law and you do a word search of covert comes up twice in there, and it demands that the state of Georgia and all of the counties develop a covert implant on each ballot.
Yes.
So that they can be tracked.
Well, that makes sense to me with all the fake ballots floating around.
Well, wouldn't you like to think that your vote was private?
You know, it really doesn't make that much of a difference to me, because when I vote, I'm not shy about telling people who I voted for. You know, that I'll wear the buttons and say, yes, I'm voting for Donald Trump, and I'm voting for fair elections, and I'm voting for peace and lower taxes.
Well, you're a rarity if you think that it's okay for everybody to know how you voted, because you might get blacklisted if you voted against how your boss wanted you to vote. You might get, hell from your church or from your neighbors if they knew that you voted for an alderman or whoever, whatever, dog catcher, name it. But the name
Yeah,
of
but
the
you
game
see, here's
is
the
that
problem.
American
Here's the
state-
problem.
you're
David,
not
David,
actually
David,
defending-
David, you have not established that an ID to prove that a ballot is genuine in any way tracks back to identifying the voter. Because that's not what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make sure that the ballot is a genuine one and not a counterfeit.
Well, that gets into layers and layers of paranoia regarding our public right to vote. And the idea that America has been tricked by paranoids into developing security systems for something that has become enormous, when in fact every ballot, I'm old enough to remember when I was a first-time voter, I walked a little more than a block away from my house to a little old lady's front porch, and she ran the precinct for, about 4 square blocks or so.
Yes.
And it wasn't a stranger that was going to come in because everybody knew who lived within 4 square blocks.
Yes.
And that was in the suburbs of St. Louis. This wasn't in Pawtuxet. This wasn't in, some massive area like New York City. You could have a precinct within a given building, so no stranger would come in. One apartment building, and a precinct like that. Then you don't have to have special printing costs. Then you don't have to have special, marshals and all kind of people who will triple check. You talk about bureaucrats when it should be something simple.
Well, I agree, and that's why I wrote the article, How to Have Honest Elections, which is on the main page at whatreallyhappened.com, right underneath that hideously outdated picture of myself at the upper left. But again, what you're missing is any kind of an indication that ballot authentication tracks back to identifying the voter in question. And the second question I would ask you is, how are you going to correct the problem that we have with massive fraudulent elections that we saw in 2016 and 2020. I mean, heck, going all the way back to John F. Kennedy.
Well, that's actually really easy to deal with because if you remember, there have been these companies. The first one I knew of was ChoicePoint. And that was a private eye company in Florida that was hired in the year 2000. And they were paid $5 million to remove all the illegal voters from the Florida lists.
Okay.
And so they were paid by the piece, basically. And so they had a vested interest in getting people off of there.
Yes.
Not keeping them on. And so when you start paying people by the piece to remove voters, if they found a Sam Smith in 1922 had committed a crime in Montana, they would take a Sam Smith off the voting lists in Florida in the year 2000. And so they got paid to screw up. And when the accounting came in on...
Okay, you're not answering my question.
Yeah, I am.
No, you're not. How are you going to solve the problem with fraudulent elections?
The fraudulent elections are put together by people who are scamming the state and removing
okay, how do you fix that?
Voters.
How do you fix that?
How do you keep the honest voters on the voting list, and how do you keep the crooks voting? That's what's going on. And ChoicePoint was found to have a 94% inaccuracy rate.
Okay.
Only 6% of the people they took off, only 6% were actually guilty. And
okay, David, you're not offering a solution to vote fraud. You are, in fact, giving us reasons not to try and improve the situation.
Yeah, they did. Listen to it out. What happened to ChoicePoint the next election cycle? The biggest Homeland Security contract of all Homeland Security contracts for the year 2004 was to ChoicePoint to do the same screw-up to all 50 states and the troops overseas.
David, you're not answering my question. How are you going to deal with the election fraud we saw in 2016 and 2020 if you're not going to have covert means to verify that ballots are authentic and not reprinted in somebody's, back warehouse? That's a big problem. Yes, the illegal immigrants should not be allowed to vote. And the other problem we have is those voting machines by Dominion and the rest of them, they're black boxes and they're not subject to audit, as we saw in Maricopa. And so it's one thing to call on in and scream that this isn't fair and this isn't fair and this is racist and so forth. But, you know, I'm interested in people who have an actual solution on how to have fair, honest,
Michael,
and verifiable elections. And as I said before in the show, the burden of proof is on the government, not us.
Michael, how many years has it been that I've told you that Donald Trump is organized crime? And I've been calling your show for almost 20 years, I'll bet.
Yeah, and you're still dodging the question.
Family is organized crime.
David,
right?
David, do you have a way to stop election fraud and guarantee election honesty, accuracy, and transparency?
Put the Bushes and the Trumps in prison.
So, in other words, you're saying no.
I didn't say no. I said put them in prison, and then you're going to get rid of the problem.
No, you're not, because there are always going to be other people who will take advantage of the flaws in the system, such as the electronic voting. All right, listen, David.
In Arizona, are they trying to find the secret data on the ballot? They're demanding from, if you read the latest reports from the Arizona recount, they're trying to find, they're trying to get the election board to give them data on every voter.
No,
right?
they're trying to get the data on the votes that were cast. They're not trying to go back. Okay,
board.
David, let me ask you a question here. Okay, you seem to represent a point of view that voter ID is racist, but vaccine ID is not. And you know, you're attacking
voter ID. Would that be done by a privatized company? Would some privatized
We don't need a private company to show up with a driver's license. You want to know who's being racist? The Democrats are, because they're out there saying that blacks and Hispanics can't get a driver's license.
Hey, is your driver's license in your state a card that is owned by the state, or is it owned by a privatized company?
In Indiana, it's owned by the state.
So would a voter ID be another?
Okay, then what is your solution,
contract?
David? What is your solution? If you don't have a solution, then this call is over.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. A precinct that's so small that you know everybody in it, and there's no strangers show up in mass. These
well, that's basically what I put in that article I wrote, How to Have Honest Elections, and I'm going to refer that to you, and our phone lines are loading up. So, David, I gave you a big chunk of time. We're going to let you go and switch over to Layla in Canada. Layla, welcome to the show. Welcome to RBN. I understand you had a really good show Sunday night.
Actually, it started off very badly. I was like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a car.
it's everybody does that the first time. I mean, the first time I did a radio show over on that other network, you know, I was stumbling and stuttering and stammering, and you know, it's just something. You'll get used to it. You know, it's not like you're a total neophyte. You know, you are an experienced industry veteran, and I'm sure you're going to hit your stride real quick.
And that was my problem. I was accustomed. I had completely forgotten that when you're doing TV news, you sit there at the anchor desk with the team chit-chattering as though we're buddies while the voiceover announces the news and the names of the people.
Yeah.
So I wasn't prepared. I didn't realize first I should say who I am and what the show is. Anyway.
Yes.
I hope to do a better job this Sunday, and if it weren't for Steve Elkin, I would have drowned. But anyway, my reason for calling today, the same old subject, Palestine.
Yes.
If the Palestinians are mounting a strong resistance, where are they building their equipment, their hardware?
Probably down in those tunnels that Israel claims they're bombing.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
I said probably down in those tunnels that Israel claims they are currently bombing.
Okay, and where are they actually where are they getting the material to build them? In other words, for Palestine on its own to succeed, it cannot, that is very likely impossible.
Well, I'm sure the Vietnamese felt the same way before they kicked out the United States.
That's a different story. Remember how they had to use an exfoliation, Agent Orange, because the Vietnamese, and also the Americans were not familiar or comfortable in that territory. Whereas Israel has wide open spaces, it is up above, and you can see everything. And furthermore, Israel is in charge. It's basically the master of the region. Let's not kid ourselves. But the Palestinians, the only way they can succeed is if they drag in other powers. And that's why they're putting in a spectacle of, oh my God, look how my husband is beating me. I'm a victim of domestic abuse. Please come and save me.
Well, I think Palestine has become a really good example of why there should be immigration control, because back in 1944, Palestine adopted a policy of uncontrolled immigration, and look how that turned out.
It wasn't Palestine, it was the British. And actually, the British did have restrictions. They had a quota. And that's why the Zionists had to sneak in their illegal immigrants, because the British had a quota that they were trying to pursue, and the Zionists, the Bolsheviks, were trying to get rid of the British so they could open up to immigration.
Well, that's why they bombed the King David Hotel.
To get rid of the British, to drive them away. And that's another reason, by the way, I don't want to bring in another subject, but that's why Mohandas Gandhi was so well able to defeat the British, because British India was so involved in trying to take over Mesopotamia and to try and control the disputes, the rebellions in Palestine, as well as in Egypt, where Lord Moyne was assassinated. So they were stretched far too thin. But anyway, back to today. Today, Palestine has obviously been building up an arsenal. Who supplied it? It means that there's going to be other powers dragged in. Are we willing to send our sons and daughters there to fight for Palestine? And that's
no, I don't think we should send our sons or daughters to fight for Israel either.
Well, a lot of them are already Americans and are making a particular choice. But let's remember, Jews were here from the beginning. Although they may control too much, I agree completely with that, because my career was restricted by the Jews in TV news who saw me as a Palestinian. But today I'm looking back and I'm thinking, and I've learned the contributions that they have made. They helped build this country. They also exploited it. There's no doubt about that. And they shipped many of its resources over. Like it was like a farm. They sent over the intelligence, the creativity, the ingenuity of America to help build Israel. But it was a two-way street. But anyway, back to Palestine. I have a question. Has anyone bothered to ask, where are the Christians?
That's a good question. That's a very, very good question.
I'll tell you where they are. Let me tell you where they are. They've been first they were driven out by the Bolsheviks in 48. I believe Ben-Gurion tried to reach out to the Christians to join them, but the Christians were too afraid of the Muslim majority, or they had already been so deeply indoctrinated to accept the Arab identity, they would not betray the other Arabs. So they stayed with the Arabs. But since then, after Israel took over, let me give you a very personal example. About 20 years ago, I got a call from one of my mother's cousins, his daughter. She phoned me and she said, we're in California illegally, and we were smuggled in. We had to leave Bethlehem because the thugs, the Muslims in Bethlehem, were walking through the streets with rifles slung over their shoulders, guns in their belts and in their hands, telling us if we didn't cover our hair and wear sleeves down to our wrists and skirts down to our ankles, they would rape us. Meanwhile, don't forget what happened to the Coptic Christians in Egypt. Remember the Muslims that were kidnapping Coptic girls and either raping them and destroying their lives afterwards, because no Christian would then marry them, or they were forced to convert to Islam and marry a Muslim as a slave. And remember when the Coptics were in a church praying, and then the church was set on fire. It was surrounded by armed Muslims, and the village knew that these were Muslims, not Mizrahi Jews disguised as Muslims. They shot the Christians coming out of the church as they were trying to escape. And that is only one small example of what they've done to Christians. And as I recommended once before, go back to the days of Alexandria and the woman Hypatia, Hypatia.
Yes.
That is when the Christians were killing Christians, the Jews were killing Christians, the Christians were killing Jews. However, since then, in Israel, the Christians there are not only safe, if they are Israeli citizens that aren't plotting against Israel, but the last time I called to try and arrange to go and study at the Hebrew U in Jerusalem, the guy I spoke to obviously had a Muslim name. And I said to him, make sure that if I do come, that if they're going to put me in a roommate situation, that they know that I'm a Palestinian Christian so that whoever I'm with doesn't feel uncomfortable. Well, his answer was, well, I accept all religions. I'm tolerant. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, that's not what I meant, because when I was there before, it was different. And then his answer was, I said, well, I'm surprised you're in a very high-level position at the university. He said, yes. Now we work in their buildings, we study in their universities, and we work in all their professions. Well, isn't that lovely? I mean, talk about gratitude.
Yes.
And a lot of the women, for example, there's one woman, Diana Boutou, who's a Canadian, educated in Israel when her family came to Canada. She got her law degree. Then she went back to be an advisor during the time of Arafat. I do remember seeing a video of her with two others where they were complaining that the Palestine National Authority was using all the money that it was getting, not to restore the Church of the Nativity, which was so valuable to the Christian world,
yes,
and the Christians who were sending money for them. It was rotting. They ignored it. No, they were building what they described as Taj Mahals for themselves. So there's a lot of corruption amongst and even Hanana Shrawi, a very articulate woman. Mm-hmm. She was the ex-girlfriend of Peter Jennings, an anchor at ABC. She resigned recently from the Palestinian Authority. She never said it openly, but read between the lines, it's the corruption. So this use, it's almost like the woman who provokes her husband where nobody can see, and then she goes out into the street crying as he chases her, and she says, look, he's beating me. They're putting on a spectacle. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to disparage all Muslims. God forgive me, because I have a lot of Muslim friends, and I know they're going to be angry with me. But the word Muslim comes from the word mit salam. That is when the armies would put a sword to the throat of a non-Muslim.
Layla, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the music is playing. We got to take another commercial break. Thank you for the call. We got other callers waiting on the lines, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to our show here. And again, a friendly reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network needs your continuing support so that we can go on doing what it is that we are doing. And the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719. Now, if you send in a donation of $100, you will get your choice of a Republic Broadcasting coffee mug or a Republic Broadcasting t-shirt, and I understand we're down to mediums only, but they are trying to order some more of those in the assorted sizes. If you send in $115 or more, you will get both items. And don't forget that Front Sight Firearms deal. That is a real sweetheart. All righty, we're going to go back to the phones now. We got a lot of callers waiting. Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. The last few calls were very interesting. Congratulations to Layla on our show.
Yes.
And to the other caller, about the voting stuff. We can't go back to the. I'm not sure that Layla was in the early '60s or something. I don't know, before Kennedy when they started rigging the elections.
Don't forget the Battle of Athens. They've been rigging elections long before Kennedy.
Well, that's true. But, exactly, I think you're absolutely right. You should have to show your driver's license to vote. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
Show it everywhere else. When you go into the airport, you got to have your ID to get on the airplane. Show your driver's license. Your license should be scanned. If it's a good license, if it's not suspended, you can vote. If it's suspended, you can't even vote either. Okay, so that's how I look at that. But here's what I want to talk about, Mike. You were talking about earlier about water shortages.
Yes.
Okay, in Brazil, as you know, the commodities market's going to go off the charts. Coffee, orange juice, and sugar is all coming out of Brazil. They're going to have a major drought in Brazil this year. Okay, now with the Brazilians, we're going to have this massive drought that's going to hit like in here in California. Okay, Mike?
Yes.
So the food prices are going to go off the charts. We're going to have food rioting probably in the summer or probably in wintertime. Who knows what's going to happen? You guys bubbling buffoons flood our country with multiple millions of illegals. 9 million illegals in California, like I've been telling your show for the last 2 years. 9 million, 8 million, whatever the hell the case is. It's insanity. And thanks for that great call from Jim from New York. I hope he calls in today. And, you know, Mike, going back to this illegal invasion, these people are like locusts. They're going to eat up the field, and after they leave, there will be nothing left for nobody. Okay? They're coming here. They're not going down to Argentina. They're not going to Colombia. They're not going to Central America. They're coming to the United States of America where the gringo, the white man, okay? And everybody else is thinking the white man. All these Africans are coming here, okay? The white man. No, listen, we need to stop this right now. Desist this right now. This was a stolen election.
Yes.
Biden did steal the election. I don't care what any of your callers say. I don't care if the guy from New Jersey calls in, that knucklehead, talking about the lumber's went up 60% there in New Jersey. I can't wait till your taxes go up another 50%. We'll see how long and much you love your state of New Jersey, the garden state. You better be growing vegetables in your garden to eat, because let me tell you, that's exactly what you're going to have to be doing here soon. You won't be able to go to a store with luxury, you go into a store in Walmart and all that, getting food pretty soon, the way things are going with this bumbling buffoon. Wants to take $200 million, all this other stuff this guy's doing. It's just absurd, Mike. It's just absurd. Now, going back to California. Mike, I've been out to California. I was going out to California in the early 80s, all the way up to 2009.
Yes.
Okay? Yes. I remember in Winchester County, you could not waste water. If you wasted water, they had water stations. And if somebody saw you wasted water, you would get a major fine, Mike.
Yes.
That was back in the 80s, in the 70s. If you wasted water in California, some people would shoot you. I mean, it could get a point where you could get shot for being a guy who's wasting water in these 55-gallon barrels. Now, right now, we're going to have a drought in California. You've got millions of illegals in there consuming like locusts, Mike.
Yes.
Okay? Zog, and I don't want to talk about Palestine and Israel right now. Look,
yes.
I don't know whose land is it anyway. Whose land does that belong to? Who does that land belong to? I know the Romans were in there at one time.
Yes.
The Romans were in Israel. That's why they have to go that way. And if you actually look at it about the hook nose, that's where it comes from, the Roman soldiers. I heard today. I don't know if I believe that, but anyway, getting back to what I say, Mike, about this immigration invasion.
Yes.
California, Texas, Arizona, all these hundreds of thousands of people keep pouring in this country. So what? So they can speak a different language. So they can say white man's a bad man. We're going to take your land back. They're going to say that they owned all that land at one time. What did they ever build there? Did they ever have cities there? Did they have freeways there? Did they have baseball? Did they have Disneyland? Did they have any of that stuff? These illegals that are coming here saying they own everything. Now they're taking their land back. What the hell is this? You got white garbage like Biden stealing elections, destroying our country. He gets and then he gets the audacity and his wife, and he's like he can't even attention a soldier anymore. I mean, this guy Biden, and Jill Biden walks around like she's this priss. Here the woman was an adulteress. She's not on her first husband with Joe. And she lied about that. Oh, that was a filthy scam lie that the media doesn't want to cover. They don't want to cover Hunter Biden's laptop.
All right, Tom.
I mean, Mike, it's insane. Yeah.
It is. Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. Phone lines are open, 512-248-8252. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We have phone lines open right now. Area code 512-248-8252. And we're going to go to Marco in Alabama. Hello, Marco. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Michael.
Thank you.
Hey, first and foremost, I just want to shout out to Tom in Florida. What's up, brother? I'm calling today because, for weeks on end, dude, I've listened to a lot of you people, and I just want to know, who do you people want for a presidential candidate other than Donald Trump? Because there is nobody. The GOP bench is paper thin.
Yes.
All these people you guys keep listing are not ready for prime time. If you take people like Governor Nome and DeSantis away from their states will suffer because of liberal commie woke, they'll just turn into woke hells, dude.
Okay.
And then we'll have no redoubts of freedom to fall back on. If you take General Flynn, we lose a powerful advocate to fight the New World Order. And don't even get me started on the crackhead idea, dude, of Tulsi Gabbard. You guys really want a CFR member as president? I mean, Trump has to finish what he started. The economy was visibly better under Trump. The world was more stable under Trump. The New World Order had to walk back most of their crap because of Trump exposing them for the imps and feckless commie minions they were. I hear all of you guys when you guys say, you know, how Trump was on board with the vaccines. What would any of you do? They were locking up the economy. You know, Trump was surrounded by traitors, backstabbers, and feckless Republicans. In my opinion, Trump deserved a second term, and he would have got it if not for the turncoat Republicans and weak, you know, commie rhinos who were bribed and corrupted by the New World Order. Now, don't get me wrong now, Trump was not the answer, but he was the father of the reformation that this Republican Party went through in 2016.
Yes.
We changed, and this party is not the same. We brought in moderate liberals, people like me, former Democrats over. All of this backlash against Trump, dude, stems from conservative Republican cowardice. The Democrats used force to steal the election. They rioted, they destroyed property, they beat people, and they took control of the media. What did we do about it? Nothing. We brought words to a gunfight, and we expected Trump to save us while not backing him up. We let the left just walk in and punish us and say, dude, that January 6th, dude, the panty raid was a terrorist attack. This is where all this Trump hate stems from. Trump needed our backing, and we sat at home trusting a failed process, believing that this can't happen here, complaining about what's happening to us all the time on conservative radio instead of kicking ass, dude, and stopping the election fraud and stopping allowing them to sit here and say that January 6th was an armed insurrection. But when you click on the word armed, it says bottles and sticks.
Yes.
Well, last time I checked, dude, that's not what being armed means. And you know, basically, you know, we just sat there powerless and stunned by these NWO commie woke takeover takes, dude. And you guys did nothing, man. What do you guys expect, man?
Well, you raised several really good points, and I definitely, you know, would have preferred Trump over Biden. But the bigger problem we're dealing with right now is that if we don't stand up and make honest elections happen, you know, the Democrats are just going to own this country from here on out.
Yeah, and how do we do that, Michael? How do we do that? By sitting here and saying, look, dude, yeah, these are Americans, but they're not Americans like us and all that stuff. They never will be. These people, dude, that are walking across the border have no pride in this country, have no sentiment whatsoever, dude, towards our founding. It's time for you people, dude, to wake up, dude, and it's time to cross the line and push back, dude, even if it means physically busting heads, dude. I'm done with this, man. I'm tired of this weak nation, dude, and all that stuff, man. I mean, we're all going to go down together anyways, so you might as well go down fighting.
Well, I'm hearing that more and more from a lot of different people, and I wish it wasn't the case, but at this point it almost does feel like it's inevitable.
That's right, brother, man. It's time to just protect our families, you know, get our things, our preps ready, and it's time to sit here and say no to this mask crap, this vaccine crap. I mean, I can't even believe, dude, that the World Economic Forum, dude, was sitting there talking about, dude, encouraging companies to fire the unvaccinated. And all that stuff, man. Come on, let's get real. It's time, dude. We are being surrounded, America. We are being surrounded. All of the laws that they're creating are being created against us, and even the feckless Republicans won't even stand up for us. What is up? Let's go. Woo!
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call, and we're going to go to Mark in North Carolina. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's going on? Listen, I'm calling. I don't, I haven't been listening to your show. I can't get it again. I got it for one day, and then it shut off. On your radio part. I did listen to your show though on Friday. The repeat of your show on Friday, and I just want to say, as I guess you can see now, it looks like they're backing down now on everything. on the vaccines and
Mm-hmm.
and on the masks. I was even very happy that I did finally go to the gym today, and it had wear mask. It said we suggest you wear a mask. Hardly anybody was wearing them.
Yeah.
But the employees in a lot of stores are still wearing them.
Yes.
It's a shame, you know. I don't know whether they're afraid or whether they're told by these corporations or what. But I think the reason why they gave in is they saw, you know, the chickens are starting to come home to roost on it. This thing would happen with Fauci, that he's now being exposed as far as the Wuhan lab and North Carolina lab and all these other labs. I think people are getting, you know, they're getting scared. The same thing with Gates and Gates' marriage breaking up, probably due to the fact that he's a pet with, you know, involved with Epstein there. And I think things are looking good, but we cannot let up. These people have to go to jail for what they did. And also another thing, too. Let's understand something. They're playing games to PCR. Okay?
Yes.
When they find something around 29 cycles,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing there. Okay? But they can just rev it right up to 40 again, and they're going to say, oh, we got to do variant. Oh, this is going to kill us. Oh, we got to do something. They can start this whole thing over again.
Yes, they can.
Unless people are smart enough to see through them and understand what they're up to. Now, as far as these vaccines go, I'm more, to be honest with you, obviously I didn't take the vaccine. I'm not going to take the vaccine. I'm very upset my son took it. You know, I told him, I kept telling him, don't, please. And since they were little, I used to always teach them against flu vaccine and other vaccines, eat healthy, stay away from, you know, artificial, you know, type of medicine, artificial foods like GMO. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, listen, I just pray to God they'll be okay. Just like I pray to God you'll be okay. I know you took the shot.
Yes.
You know? But it does have, but people are having side effects, way more than other vaccines so far.
Yes, very much so.
Very, very dangerous, very concerning, and I think these people have to be punished. I think we need a Nuremberg-like trial, and some of them I think should be hanged in public, either hanged or you know, beheaded in public, like with the guillotine.
Yes,
because it's so horrible what they did. I mean, they can't just get away with it like Fauci. Fauci is a scumbag. There's no question about it. He is involved. I didn't think it was artificial, but now I'm thinking more and more that this virus is man-made. It is not natural. And
well, you know, going on back to HBO and that documentary, The Crime of the Century, I mean, you've got to watch that. It's a two-parter, and, you know, if you had any delusion that the medical industrial complex is really concerned with your health, this documentary will end that. It's really all about extracting money from the human population through various medical subterfuges.
Really, I'm surprised. I'm surprised they would even show something like that. You know,
I'm surprised it got on HBO as well. But then they also ran the Hacking Democracy documentary, and that was a real eye opener.
What was it called? What's this one about the viruses called?
Well, it's not about the virus. It's about the opioid scandal, the Sackler family and Purdue just making billions and billions of dollars getting Americans addicted to fentanyl and other opiates and bribing doctors to write prescriptions. And it's called The Crime of the Century. And I put an article about it on whatreallyhappened.com that lists the show times when episode 1 will be seen.
Okay, check that out. I just want to also say to somebody, I'm not going to mention names, but somebody, don't be a hypocrite, okay? Please, okay? What's going on in Palestine is a crime.
Yes.
The Israelis are you know, indiscriminately bombing these people. And one thing I will say also, they're not as invincible as some people think anymore. Originally, the Israeli army was, you know, were pioneers who felt that they had nowhere to go if they were defeated. Many of the Israelis today, I'm talking about the Israeli Jews, are people coming from the United States and from Russia in the last 20 or 30 years.
And from Canada.
Probably Russia. They all have dual citizenship. But if they don't feel their backs are to the sea, they know if they go back to Russia, Putin welcomes them. Even the ones that left during the Soviet Union, they could go back to the United States anytime they wanted. I don't think they should, because I think if you fight for another country, you give
Normally, if you fight for another country, you can lose your citizenship, but it doesn't apply to Israel.
No, well, it should. And I don't know about how many came from Canada, but but it's mostly from the United States and Russia. And that's why they're not the fighters they used to be. That's why they're doing everything by air. And they tried Hezbollah, they still got their butts kicked, okay? And they probably get their butts kicked again by Hezbollah if they dare to enter into Lebanon. So everything they have to do is by air. And at some point, these other Arab countries may join in, like Syria, or even Iran itself. So not an Arab country, but still, Middle Eastern country. The only thing is, of course, the Israelis have those nukes.
Yes.
That really makes them dangerous now.
Yeah, but, the instant Israel uses a nuclear weapon, it's going to be very obvious. They have been lying to the world about them. It's going to be obvious to the American people that our government has been lying to us about Israel's nuclear weapon. Israel may have them, but the political cost of actually using one of them is very, very high.
One thing you got to understand, too, there is an Islamic nukes, and that's in Pakistan.
Yes.
So those things could be transported to Iran if they're not already, which wouldn't surprise me. And they could even be used just to fire from there. It would only take 1 or 2 nukes, and that would be it for Israel.
Yes.
It would take a lot more than that to take out Iran. So, they're playing with fire, and I don't like what's going on. I don't think we should get involved in all the United States. We should stay out. It's none of our business. This is something, let them, these people want to keep fighting each other, let them keep fighting each other. But also, I just want to address this caller again, okay? I heard her on Friday, when I played Friday's show. I heard her again before. Don't be a hypocrite, okay? Don't be a hypocrite. You always were complaining about what the Israelis did, and you have a right to complain. So don't turn around now, please, and start that kind of nonsense. And as far as the U.S., let's just stay out of it. Okay, Mike, thanks. I hope, I'll probably try to listen to your show tonight, all right?
All right. Well, we're still, there's always the audio playback at RBN. The archives are always there. Ron Gibson is still putting up the recordings that we're making of these shows, but we are working on a new streaming solution because I'm not going to go back to YouTube. Not even with all the hot oil nude massage videos they have.
I got your show on BitChute. That's where I got it on Friday. Okay.
Okay.
I wish you would go live. Maybe you could go live on Patreon. I understand he's screening out. You can screen on Patreon now with Mike Adams.
All right, I'll take a look at that. I mean, I've looked at about 10 different solutions so far, and some of them don't have the bandwidth. Others already have a reputation for banning politically sensitive videos, and the others want to charge, rather sizable amounts of money to host my stream.
And Mike Adams is not that way. From what I gather, he's putting a lot of stuff on Patreon now, really getting better.
All right, I'll check over there and see if he's got room for me.
Also, Rumble would be a pretty good thing too, I think.
Yeah, well, I went to Rumble and I contacted them about paying their fee through PayPal rather than a credit card, but I never heard back from them.
Okay, but I know they're pretty good. All right, Mike, you take it easy, right, buddy?
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to go to another Mark, this one in Montana. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hola, Miguel. How are you doing, buddy? I'm the oil field guy from West Texas.
Yes, I remember you.
I'm sorry if that'll give you nightmares, won't it? I thought I'd give everybody a little bit of a kind of an education on oil. Just pure facts, nothing politically sensitive. A barrel of oil is not 55 gallons. A barrel of oil is 42 gallons.
Okay.
The reason that is, the whiskey drums were sent out from back east to keep the workers happy and satisfied, and they used them to haul the crude oil back east. out of that 42 gallons, once they do their refining process, and I've actually been to a refinery, which was kind of cool, they get 43 gallons of product out of it.
Yes.
Of that 43 gallons, only 19 are used for fuel. And that 19, the majority of that is used for jet fuel, for airplanes. The rest of it goes for cars and tractors and whatever else. If you look around you right now, almost everything you're touching is petroleum-based. If you're driving on an asphalt road, which is oil. Your vehicle is probably 80 to 90% oil-based of some sort. Your tires, your paint, your dash. So when you guys talk about doing away with oil, I know you don't. You're a realist, but
yeah,
some of these other yahoos about doing away with oil, you're not going to be able to do it and maintain the society that we have. I mean, it's just a fact of life. There's no replacement. These windmills, I believe it takes them 30 years to recoup the amount of energy that it takes to put in a windmill.
Mm-hmm.
Solar's got a lot of problems with the rare earth minerals because we don't have any. The Africans and the Chinese have control of all that.
Yes, they do.
So you got to think about it. And right now the oil field's picking back up. I'm actually heading to northern Wyoming for a new job.
Okay, Mark, I'm sorry. I got to let you go. We got to take a break for a commercial. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and a quick program note before we go back to the phones here. I am not going to be able to do a live radio show tomorrow. Instead, we're going to do a couple of replays focusing on Dr. Tom Cohen and Sally Morrell on germ theory and the contagion myth, followed up by the interview we did with Michael Knox of the U.S. Peace Memorial Organization. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Karen in West Virginia. Hello, Karen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I watched a really interesting video. I don't know if you are familiar with Catherine Austin Fitz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty smart about financial stuff, and it's an hour and something. I'll send it to you in a link, but it's she believes that the United States is actually that we've privatized the Treasury.
Yes.
And also, she was talking about how how they wanted to take the nuclear codes away from Biden and let a committee decide, if we were going to go to war, and that was a way of privatizing the military. But she says that these big bankers, central bankers all around the world, she said this is for all the marbles, and they're dead serious about everything they're doing. So I kind of agree with Marco. We better do something soon because it's going to be too late. They're going to own everything. And, in fact, she said when people ask her where they should put their money, she says, put your money into financing an army to stop this because it's, we're kind of running out of time. I also agree with Tom about the situation out with the drought. I lived in the Bay Area when the population was probably half what it is now, and they had water problems then. I remember there was a saying: if it's yellow, it's mellow; if it's brown, flush it down.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. And they had a lot of water problems back then, and I can't even imagine when you're letting 250,000 people in at a time. I mean, they're not all going to Southern California, but a lot of them are in Arizona and Southern California, so I don't know where they think they're going to get the water. And I did see a map, and it looks like everything west of the Rockies is in big trouble.
Yes.
So I don't think we're going to have a real pleasant summer. But, I do agree with Marco that, we're running out of time, and I think Trump should get another term, but he should get rid of his kids. And also, I'll never forgive him for letting Jonathan Pollard go.
Yeah, me
then
neither.
Not helping Assange or Snowden. I mean, the guy's got a lot of problems, but I don't know what else. I don't know who else they could run that could even win. I mean, even if it was fair.
Well, we got to work on the fairness of the elections first. Otherwise, any discussions about who is running, is moot. The candidate will be selected for us and installed into office, and they'll reassure us it's the will of the people. But we know it isn't. Anyway, listen, Karen, I got to let you go. The music is playing. My apology to those callers still waiting on hold. Please try and call back on Thursday. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure it's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Spread the word of public broadcasting. Pardon me. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.